Hello, I'm continuing right away with Horror Nights history for Halloween Horror Nights 18 Reflections of Fear. This is now part 9. Part 9. Good God, how many of these am I going to have to do to get through with that year? Probably a bunch. Yeah. Because there was so much going on in 2008. Well, let's get on to it. I was talking about the Hallow, and I talked about the horned god character Samhain who appeared in the house. Although, disclaimer, there is no actual pagan deity by that name. It's the name of the festival of Halloween. In the old Celtic language, it means summer's end. Okay, got that claim. And just in case you didn't watch the last video, because a bunch of people don't. I've always had different numbers of views on different videos. Some people will watch this one and not watch the others. Some people watch all of them. I don't know why. They're part of a series. Yeah. Anyway. Also in the house, there were scenes that took place themed to different motifs of Halloween. So, for example, you had a room for jack-o'-lanterns. And you had a figure of the jack-o'-lantern's head. It was filled with jack-o'-lanterns, and you had the some of which were quite gruesome, and of course the figure of a jack-o'-lantern headed creature was haunting that room. You had a room that was for witches, and so there were a number of hags in that room. A room for ghosts or skeletons in which they were coming out of the graves. There was a room that was for trick-or-treat, and it was filled with trick-or-treaters. You were actually walking down a path, and there were all these little trick-or-treaters on the side here and there, and some of them were just mannequin figures, and some of them were alive, but you didn't know which until it was too late. And there was a room for the black cat imagery we have in Halloween, with lots of meows and sinister cats. Yay cats, Bob would have liked that. And of course at the end you had a sort of scenario with a great room where you had stone columns and things, but you had like maybe it was a tree or something with Samhain lurking to come out and attack you as you left the house. It was very evocative of the festival of Halloween and its history, and it was really a really nifty house. I don't think I did it justice in describing it, but it really was a nifty house. 2008 was perhaps the year that really brought the whole spirit of Halloween into Halloween Horror Nights more than ever before, ever since. You really had the feeling of the holiday in the event that year, partially due to this house, but also due to some other things that I'll talk about later in the scare zones and such. Then going on to the next house, that would be in the other sprung tent, which I believe is sprung tent too, and that was Dead Exposure. Now, in the history of Halloween Horror Nights, and I have been fortunate enough to walk through every single haunted house since the Dungeon of Terror back in 1992. And in the history of Halloween Horror Nights, this was one of the most, if not the most frightening house I have ever been in. For me, and not just for me, for other people who have been longtime fans of Halloween Horror Nights, also repeated the same sentiment. This was a damn scary house. The one moment in Halloween Horror Nights that I found as frightening, or almost as frightening, I mentioned before, I think it was 1998, Insanity, I think that was 1998, where they put you into a room. It was a pulsed house in 98, and they put you into a room with a small group of people, and it was totally dark, and the growling, snarling dogs are snapping at your heels, and you could feel something grabbing at you, and it was like, holy fuck. That was very frightening. But the Dead Exposure was at least as frightening, if not more frightening, and that was just one scene in a house. The rest of the house was not quite as frightening as that opening scene. Dead Exposure, the whole damn house was terrifying. It was set during a zombie apocalypse. It was also themed to this photographer named Charlie McPherson, I believe the name was, who of course is one of Mary Agana's victims from the website. And he was a photographer for a newspaper, and he had taken, and the idea was that he took photographs of the zombies, and you sort of enter into the photograph world with the zombies. It's a weird concept, but it worked. So you go into the room, and basically the entire house is pitch black, and the only lighting is black light strobes. So they strobe on and off very fast, and they stop for a minute, and they're black, and then they strobe again, and it's all black light strobing going on. Now, the opening scene, you're in Charlie's office, okay, and he's in there saying, quick, quick, and the zombies are trying to get into the window and stuff. You know, it's like the place is under siege. And then from that point on, you're going through different scenes, and the zombies are there, and they're after you, and it's, you know, one room after another with zombie attacks of different types. But the point is that the strobes are going off. The zombies' costumes were all black, but they were all black, and then they were painted with you know, ultraviolet touches here and there, so that when the black light flashed, you could see sort of negative effect of a zombie, and it would appear and then disappear very quickly because it's a strobe. And so he's there, then he's there, then he's there, then he's there, and next thing you know, he's right here! Holy fuck! And then, you know, the strobes again, and you're having after images going on in your eyes too, and you don't know where the hell they are, if they're over there or if they're coming up at you, and next thing you know, he's in your face, and then he's gone again, and it was like you were totally disoriented because you never know when the zombie would be right up your ass. It was terrifying. And they had all sorts of nifty effects in the houses. I remember, for example, sort of a corridor, and there's rooms on either side of you. The zombies might pop up. I think it was like a bathroom, and there were zombies in some of the stalls, and there was one here, and he was on a sliding thing, so he could come sliding right up and then slide right back. And that with the strobe light made it very, oh my God, what the fuck, you know, that kind of, it was a really neat thing. Plus, they got you from every freaking direction. There was a zombie in the floor. This was a glass panel which had a mannequin of a zombie underneath it, so when it flashes you see a zombie under your feet. But then after you pass that, suddenly there's a zombie in the ceiling. This was a character in a zombie costume who was moving, and he's right up above you in the ceiling, and through a glass panel as well. And that was like, damn, you got one up above, one below you, coming through the sides, you know, and that whole time that this is happening, there are walls that are actually softer material, and arms and things are coming through the walls, sort of like, you know, so you don't know what's happening. Then you're in a room where you have a bazillion zombies all around you, and some of these are just mannequins, maybe hanging from the ceiling, and some of them are characters, and you don't know which is which. And you go through the room, and the strobes are going, and you don't know if the zombie that's here next to you will suddenly come to life, or if it's just going to hang there. And, you know, it was so intense. It is the most intense, frightening house I've ever been in. It was done perfectly. Perfectly. They recreated some scenes from this house a couple years later in 2010 as part of a house called The Hallowed Past. Horror Nights: The Hallowed Past in 2010. And it didn't do it justice. It didn't do it justice because there's light. It had to be in total darkness. That sprung tent was in total freaking darkness except for the strobe lights. But because of the Hallowed Past had scenes from different things, and you went through Frightanic, and went through another scene, Body Collectors, and you go into the Dead Exposure house, you know, there's no ceiling, and there's lights up above, and so it wasn't as dark as it was in the original tent. And so if you only went through the recreated scenes from Dead Exposure in 2010, you know, the couple of scenes they had in that Hallowed Past house, you never saw the original. It wasn't anywhere near as intense as the original, because in the original you could not see anything except the zombies themselves when the lights went on and off. Whatever was painted with black light or with ultraviolet paint was all you could see. And again, the strobe effect is what really made it, because you don't know he's there, then he's there, then, you know, it's like he's, you know, that was what really made the house work. It was brilliant, and to this day, there has never been a house as frightening as that. There hasn't. Maybe they'll top it and make a house that is so fucking scary you'll wet your pants. I don't know, but that is the change your underwear house for me throughout the history of Halloween Horror Nights. All right, now. Covered the Sprunkins. There's only 2 houses left. I might get to them in this one video. Oh my God, I hope so. The next house was one of the most spectacular houses up to this point in Halloween Horror Nights. It was the debut house for the Parade building. In 2008, we got a new venue. Nazerman's was no longer able to be used. They closed that down for Starbucks and Ben & Jerry's. And so that was one location they could no longer use. but they built the parade building to house the Mardi Gras floats. Now, even though the Mardi Gras floats are in the building, there was still a large portion of the building that was open and they could use for a haunted house. They won't be able to use the house this year because they have the Superstar Parade now, and they have the Mardi Gras floats plus the floats for the new parade, and it takes up the whole room. That's why they can't use that house anymore. I mean, that building anymore. So unfortunately, we only had that building used for houses from 2008 to 2011. Because they had some pretty interesting houses during those years in that structure. And this was the debut house for the parade building, which I think is building 97 or something like. But it was called Scary Tales: The Nightmare Continues, or Scary Tales 3 as some call it. As you remember, the original Scary Tales was going to be Terrorland in 2001. They had to change the name. And then the next one, it was going to be Cindy's house or her toy box or whatever, and it became Scary Tales. They took Cindy out in 2002. This one was already planned to be Scary Tales 3, The Nightmare Continues, from the get-go. In fact, it was originally the Icon House, because the original icon for the event was going to be the Wicked Queen. But I'm not sure why, but they had to change that. It may have to do with a certain rodent who lives down the road from Universal, and I don't know, but they took that idea out. She's no longer the icon, but she still reigned over the house in her divine majesty. Yes, the house was all about the Wicked Queen and her evil servants, and the whole world of fairy tales turned and twisted upside down. In some ways a precursor to some of the fractured fairy tales we see today, and such things like Snow White and the Huntress, or even more so, the television series Once Upon a Time, where the Wicked Queen has not been killed, and she's taken over and she's fucking life up for all the other fairy tale characters. In this house, it was even more. She had killed the other fairy tale characters or punished them horrendously. And so the other fairy tale characters had been twisted and turned, and no happy endings, basically, at all for them. You go into the house, and they didn't have the elaborate facade. They just had a cardboard sort of cutout, not cardboard, it was wood, but it was a cutout of a little gingerbread-like house, and you would go in, and you had all these wonderful fairy tale moments. You entered into the castle of the Wicked Queen, and right away you knew that the fairy tale world had been inverted, because there's Rapunzel and she's dead. She's hanging dead from the window, her hair hanging down over you, and Rapunzel is no more. And you cross a bridge and there's a troll under the troll bridge, coming at you, and you enter the castle of the queen, and you have the queen's weird servants who are called scribes, and they have all sorts of nasty tattoos all over their body. Their eyes and mouths are sewn shut, and they have all sorts of stuff. It's the fairy tales themselves. They've been rewriting the fairy tales, you see. They're rewriting them, and because of the magic of the queen, what they rewrite comes true. And then you go through scenes from the various fairy tales that have been turned upside down. You find Snow White dead in a coffin, not sleeping, dead, haha. And you find Cinderella, and she's being horribly punished by having her feet cut off. No more glass slippers for you, bitch. And then you have a dead Little Mermaid in the corner that a lot of people didn't even notice, kind of petrified. Then you go into other scenes from other fairy tales, which are all very nasty. Let's see if I can remember some of the highlights. Hansel and Gretel was a good one. You go into Hansel the witch's house, and the witch is there lurking, and these great big cooking ovens are going, and you can smell what smells like meat cooking, and you can hear the screams of little children inside the ovens. Tables have been turned there. There's a scene from The Wizard of Oz, for example, and this was, of course, related in some way to the scare zone that was also themed to Oz, and the lion and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow have been twisted into evil characters, and the lion comes popping out and terrorizing. You're not expecting the lion. It was a little puppet of a lion came out and roared at you, and you totally did not expect this lion. It was an actual, it wasn't a character. It was a lion head would come out in this horrible roar, and shock you. There were, of course, some of my favorites are Goldilocks and Little Red Riding Hood. Those scenes were rather fun. In the Goldilocks room, of course, you have this gigantic bear. An enormous bear would come out, and if you were in, timing was an issue there though, because sometimes you didn't see the bear. Okay, I have to go to part 10.